She had once ruled the palace from the shadows, feared by her enemies, adored by the Sultan, and whispered about by everyone else. But then she vanished. Hurrem Sultan, mother of princes, queen without a crown, was exiled in disgrace, cast into silence like a ghost no one dared speak of. But one night she came back. It wasn't a royal procession. There were no trumpets, no velvet carpets, just the sound of carriage wheels crunching over damp earth and the cold wind slicing through the forest. She was supposed to see her children. Just one night, a quiet reunion. But someone had other plans. Deep in the woods, something was waiting, something violent. 56 armed men, trained, paid, prepared to do one thing: make sure Hurrem Sultan never left those woods alive. What happened next was so brutal, so calculated, that even Sultan Suleiman, the most powerful man in the world, would be shaken to his core. This is the true story of the assassination attempt that nearly changed Ottoman history. And by the end of this video, you'll realize Hurrem didn't just survive. She came back to conquer. She wasn't just a concubine. She was a queen in all but name. And that made her dangerous. Hurrem Sultan had clawed her way up from slavery into the most powerful bed in the empire. But the Ottoman palace wasn't just velvet and gold. It was knives and whispers, daggers behind every curtain. And Hurrem? She had made enemies. Big ones. The first was Valide Sultan, the Sultan's own mother, a woman raised in poison and politics. To her, Hurrem was not a wife, but a threat. A woman who laughed too loudly, loved too openly, and refused to know her place. Then there was Mahidevran, the Sultan's former favorite. She had given him his firstborn son. She thought that guaranteed her power. But then came Hurrem, with fiery hair, ruthless ambition, and 5 royal children of her own. And the walls of the harem began to close in. Plots began to stir, silent, elegant, deadly. A trusted servant was found dead. Hurrem's horse was poisoned. Letters went missing. One morning, her most loyal handmaid simply disappeared. And then the final blow. Without trial, without warning, exile. She was sent away from the palace, far from her children, far from a man she once believed loved her more than life itself. Suleiman said nothing, not a word. He just let her go. But silence is never empty. In the Ottoman Empire, silence is the loudest warning of all. Alone in a cold, distant villa, Hurrem waited. Days turned to weeks. Her children's laughter gone. Her name erased. Her future uncertain. But she wasn't broken. She was watching, listening, planning. Because Hurrem knew one thing better than anyone. Every empire has 2 wars, one on the battlefield and one in the shadows. And in the shadows of the Ottoman palace, someone had just declared war. It was late, too late, the kind of hour when shadows stretch longer than they should, and even the wind sounds like a whisper. The order came quietly, from the one person Hurrem never expected. Valide Sultan, the same woman who orchestrated her exile, was now inviting her back. But only for one night, and only to see her children. Hurrem should have questioned it, but the thought of seeing Marima, her daughter, her mirror, and Selim, her fragile son, was too powerful. So she said yes. That night, a small convoy was prepared. No fanfare, no royal guards in shining armor, just a few loyal attendants and a carriage cloaked in secrecy. The forest road to the palace was long, winding, and isolated. Before she left, one of her handmaidens, Esma, grabbed her hand. "Are you sure about this, Sultanum?" Hurrem smiled softly. "No, but I've lived too long in fear. It's time I returned." As the carriage creaked forward into the dark, the atmosphere thickened. The air was heavy. The trees leaned in like they were listening. The horses were restless. The guards rode in silence, eyes darting from branch to branch. Something was off. Up ahead, her children waited, Marima pacing, Selim clutching a lantern with small, trembling hands. They didn't know. They had no idea their mother was being brought back under the cover of night. But someone else knew. Someone who wanted to make sure she never made it. Halfway through the woods, the horses stopped. Not by command, but by instinct. There was something blocking the road. A fallen tree? No, several, placed intentionally, like barricades. The lead guard dismounted cautiously, sword drawn, and that's when the first arrow flew. It struck him through the throat. He didn't scream. He gurgled. Then chaos erupted. From the trees they came, masked men, blades glinting, faces hidden. There were dozens. The guards were slaughtered where they stood. The driver was pulled from his seat and hacked down before he could beg for his life. Inside the carriage, Hurrem froze. She could hear every scream. Every bone snapped. Every plea cut short. She knew this wasn't a robbery. This was a hit. Sultanim run. A blood-soaked guard flung open the door. But before she could even stand, a hand reached in. And then, something snapped inside her. She wasn't a victim. She was a mother. A queen. And she would not die in the dirt. She kicked the attacker in the chest, leapt out the side, and ran. Branches tore at her face. Her dress tangled around her legs. Her breath came in bursts. Behind her, the sounds of slaughter faded, replaced by the sound of footsteps chasing her through the woods. She had no weapon, no plan, no allies, just instinct, and one chilling realization. This wasn't Valide's mercy. It was Valide's trap. The horses reared back violently. The carriage rocked side to side. And then, everything went still. Up ahead, the trees had fallen, not by nature, but by design. Thick logs blocked the path, like a wooden wall. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a signal. The guards knew it. Hurrem felt it. "Form a perimeter," one of them shouted. But they were already too late. From the tree line, whispers became screams. Figures moved like shadows between the trees. Silent at first, then screaming as they charged. The first guard fell without a sound, arrow through his eye. Another turned to react, a blade across his throat. Blood sprayed the lantern. Light flickered. Then darkness. They were surrounded. 56 men. Masked. Ruthless. Organized. This wasn't a bandit ambush. This was a military operation. And the target was one woman. Inside the carriage, Hurrem gripped the window ledge. Her fingernails dug into the wood as screams erupted outside. One by one, her escorts were cut down like cattle. "Sultanim, stay inside," someone shouted. She didn't listen. She kicked the door open, just in time to see the last guard fall to his knees, sword broken, blood pouring from his mouth. And behind him, a man stepped forward, tall, hooded, calm, like he was expecting her. "Hurrem Sultan," he said quietly, "the forest is where your story ends." She froze. Then, two men grabbed her arms from behind. She fought, bit, screamed, kicked, but they were stronger. One pulled out a curved dagger, gleaming in the moonlight. He raised it, aimed for her heart, but before he could strike, Hurrem slammed her head backwards, smashing the nose of the man holding her. He screamed and dropped her. She twisted, elbowed the other one in the ribs, and ran. The trees swallowed her whole. Behind her, men screamed, boots thundered, but the forest was dark, thick, wild. Hurrem dodged trees like she'd lived there her whole life. Branches sliced her face. Mud soaked her dress. Thorns tore at her arms. But she didn't stop. She didn't even think. She just ran. Behind her, voices grew louder. "Find her. She went this way. Do not let her reach the palace." She stumbled, fell, crawled. Then she saw it. A narrow ditch, overgrown with moss and roots. Without hesitation, she rolled in, burying herself in the earth, covering her body in leaves. Footsteps passed within inches. Torches flickered above her, a breath away from discovery. But they kept running. She lay still, not blinking, not breathing, every part of her body shaking. She had escaped for now. Somewhere deeper in the woods, her bloodied carriage burned. Back at the palace, her children still waited, unsuspecting. And in the shadows of the trees, a war had begun. The news reached Suleiman just before dawn. A blood-soaked messenger, eyes wide with horror, whispered 5 words. They tried to kill Hurrem. He didn't speak. He didn't scream. He simply stood frozen. For the first time in years, the Sultan, ruler of the world's most powerful empire, trembled. He gave no public order, no cry for revenge. Instead, he turned to his most trusted spy and said one thing: Find out who did this. And tell no one, not even Ibrahim. What the spy uncovered would shake the empire's foundation. Of the guards who rode with Hurrem, only one survived, barely clinging to life. His throat was slashed, his legs crushed, but his eyes still burned with something stronger than fear, loyalty. He spoke just one name, hoarse and barely audible. Farhut. Afyon. That was all he managed before the light left his eyes. Farhut, a known assassin, from Afyon province. But he wasn't acting alone. Back in the woods, 2 days after the attack, a search party found her, barely alive, covered in blood and bruises, but breathing. She had dragged herself for miles, through mud, rain, and darkness, with broken ribs and torn muscles. She never stopped, because she had to see them, her children. When they carried her back into the palace on a stretcher, the corridors fell silent. Miraima was the first to run. She collapsed at her mother's side, sobbing, clutching her hand. Salim stood frozen, lips trembling, unable to speak. And in that moment, the palace changed. No longer was Hurrem a threat, a concubine, a problem. She was a survivor, and someone wanted her erased. But she had returned, not just scarred, awakened. The room was cold. The scent of incense could not mask the rot beneath the silk. Hurrem, bandaged, limping, but unbroken, stood before the one woman who had haunted her rise since day one, Valide Sultan. And the Queen Mother didn't flinch. She didn't ask if Hurrem was all right. She didn't offer comfort. She simply said, "This palace has no place for women who bring war to its gates. You will leave again." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a sentence. Hurrem stared back. No tears. No words. Only one thought pulsing in her head. I will never be weak again. That night, while the palace slept, she summoned her most trusted handmaid, Esma, a ghost in the corridors, a shadow with ears in every wall. And she gave her a command. We will not run. We will prepare. Esma understood. Over the next weeks, a secret guard began to form, loyal only to Hurrem, not trained in the barracks, but in silence, in hidden gardens, in forgotten tunnels beneath the palace. They called themselves the Circle. They didn't wear armor. They wore whispers. Servants, musicians, scribes, nobodies until the blade was drawn. Hurrem no longer trusted titles, or names, or bloodlines. She trusted loyalty and nothing else. But Valide had eyes too. And in the final days of spring, a note arrived, written in crimson ink. The tree that grows too tall will one day block the Sultan's light, and the gardener will cut it down. It was not a warning. It was a promise. She lay in a bed of silk, but there was no comfort. Every breath burned. Every stitch tugged against her flesh. But her eyes were colder than ever. Hurrem stared at the ceiling, motionless. She didn't ask who tried to kill her. She asked why they failed. Around her, the palace moved on. Servants swept halls. Whispers passed like dust in the light. But in her mind, one question repeated like a curse. Who gave the order? Valide Sultan. The Queen Mother had the power and the motive. Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier who despised her influence. Mahidevran, the jealous consort who saw Hurrem as nothing but a poison in the royal bloodline. Each name was a dagger, each smile a lie. But one thing was clear. Studio microphone, this was not an act of revenge, it was a message. And Hurrem understood it perfectly. They didn't just want her gone. They wanted her erased. But they failed. And from her bed of pain, something was being born. Not vengeance. Not rage. Strategy. The kind only a survivor could master. And when her daughter Miraima entered the room with tears in her eyes, Hurrem didn't cry. She took her hand and whispered, "Tell Esma we begin tomorrow." Because Hurrem wasn't just a target anymore. Studio microphone, she was about to become the hunter. And whatever was coming was no longer about survival. It was about domination. A new game had begun. And this time, studio microphone, she won't come alone.